Hey, this is Dean for StreetFighterTradingSystem.com. Alright, this is gonna be another Train with Dean episode, and I'm gonna talk about certain vocabulary terms, if you want to say so. We talk in our language, right? And we say context, setup, pattern, signal, and it's hard to keep track of what belongs where. Like, what do we mean if we mean pattern, and how does this relate to context and setup and these things? So that's just a couple of things I was thinking about, and I try to somehow distill it. So if you want to start, we have pattern. What is pattern? Like, pattern is anything, right, that we can define somehow. If you cannot define what you mean, if you just point on the chart and say this, and then it's probably not a pattern. Then it's just this very situation with everything included, context and maybe even personal inspiration or whatever. But a pattern is something that you can well define. Just something that has a definition. So let's say we have pattern 1, then there is another pattern, and the simplest pattern, for example, would be one bar, one specific bar. Let's say we mean a bar that closes on its top. That's it, right? So maybe a hammer or a complete bull bar. But we just say a candle that closes on its top. I mean, that's a definition. It's well defined because we don't care about the rest of the candle as long as it closes on its top. That would be a pattern because I could define it. So that would be in here, together with more complex pattern like second entries, first entries, third entries, fifth entry, and so on. Failed first entry, failed second entry. That's all patterns because we can define them. They are all gathered here in their little playground. Pattern 5. You get the idea. So they live here in this world, and by themselves they're often of no use, but we can choose some of them. So we choose some and say this is a setup. I call, let's say, pattern 2. I just say this is setup. I mean, so the difference between a pattern and a setup is just that we chose to call it differently. So maybe we gave him a name. We gave pattern number 5 a name, and so mostly we don't say setup 1, but we say, let's say, a failed second entry or failed two-legged pullback. So we chose pattern number 5, maybe let's say that was it, and gave it a name because it is of interest to us and we want to look at it. So, and like this we choose, with we I mean everyone, right? Everyone who wants to trade in any way, I think. Let's say we have a TTT setup and setup 3. Maybe also Pika is Pikachu comes from failed two-legged pullback. Still, let's say it's an own setup by itself, and so on. We have more maybe of those, or less, or whatever. So we chose those, and that makes them different from patterns. We could discard them again and put them back in the world of patterns, right? So I couldn't find a picture of a pile of tools that are not arranged, so I chose the worst looking toolbox. Like, there is no real order in here. I mean, look at it. So that is the pattern, the world of patterns. They're just lying around, and then we choose some and say, yeah, those are our powerhouses or stuff we want to look at and use. But what to use for? Yeah, to trade. So if the world stopped here, then we would be setup traders, you could call it, or pattern traders. And in our statistical study so far, within this month of failed two-legged pullback, we somehow saw that if you took every failed two-legged pullback, really every single one of them, and you should not miss one, because maybe you miss the one that actually wins, you know. So if you took every one of them, you would be profitable, as weird as it sounds. So it's hard to believe, and there must be much improvement to be made, because I mean, how stupid is it that you sit there and just take every failed two-legged pullback like a robot, and maybe there are stretches where you lose the whole day, and maybe in 2 months, who knows, market changes a bit and it's not 74 anymore percent, it's maybe suddenly less. So yeah, so there must be something else, right? And this is the context, so signified by some weird book that you need to understand how to read, um, or by the Lambos, don't be late to the party, whatever, speak the language, whatever you want to call it. But this is king, actually. Context is everything. That's just, I just say that, right? I cannot prove it, but yeah, okay. So context, aka maybe speak the language. I just put that, you know. So could be context can be whatever you, however you want to understand the market. It could be through impulses, could be through channels or whatever. But this is the context. And then if within this context, so let's give this guy a border. If within this context we have a favorable situation for one direction, let's say long, then we use our setup box, because we don't just blindly go in the direction that we know is biased, is favorable, because we want to get the best entry possible and the least drawdown, right? Sure, if we had enough money, you know, and we knew that the bias is up, but it could be that there is a drawdown of 10 points. We could just always, you know, just go in and put our stop loss to minus infinity or something. But then also, you know, if suddenly something weird happens, then you're messed up also. So you, along with the context, it's hard if you don't know when to enter. So then we take our setups. So maybe we wait, or we see a certain setup evolve and we can grab it, and we so setup X arises within this context, and that is very important. So maybe in the beginning you would be just counting every failed two-legged pullback, every two-legged pullback, and then also every TTT, which is the opposite of it. So you would be like seeing setups all over the place. But the problem is the setup is only a pattern that we somehow put on a higher level, and we call it setup. But it only turns into a signal, and that is the last step. So signal, this is where we actually buy or sell or just go in, right? So it needs context, then it needs the setup that we chose from all the patterns to arise, and that gives us a signal, right? I mean, maybe this is all like gibberish or of no use, I don't know, but for me it's good to structure these things, you know, and also to see that is the order, of things, the flow. You need the context, right? Unless you want again to automate trading that. I mean, if this works, yeah, good for you and for us and whoever. We can buy them Lambos and whatever. So when the signal arises, then we hear go short right there. Okay. So let's take an example. Let's take the TTT. I'm actually gonna delete all of that. No, I'm gonna leave it. It's nice. So with the TTT, I mean that is for everyone who doesn't know what it is. We called it the trappers. So it is a failed second entry that actually fails, and that we say okay, it's a setup. But again, that doesn't mean that you take them when they come. You know, I did the same thing. You know, you see them and you're so happy to see it, and you know, and then you just take it. But if the context is not right, I mean, if you don't understand why you would like to go in this direction, it's in vain. So I want to show, not a Lambo, no, definitely not a Lambo. I want to show here on this Google sheet that it's actually the whole statistics. There is one tab, you know, those are all like 1,000 traits or whatever that we logged. Thanks again for the great help of Darian and Gabriel also. Yeah, they made the most of the work, so that's great of logging the traits. Here also, I think Papa added the TTTs, and I want to show an example of what I mean with this context. Papa already said, I think in the last video or so, that he often sees the TTT work if a Pikachu actually fails. Yes, that is, but that's what I mean. You have a context, something fails, but you know what you want to look for. So you cannot also just take every failed Pikachu, right? That is just where to look for it. But one thing, and I think it's trait number 7, for example, here. Let's look at this guy. So we are on the third impulse up already, so that would already be close to late, but we make a range, right? And that is the context. We make a range, and the bottom of the range is not drawn here, but you could draw it through here, right? Something like this. And here we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, E that actually failed. So we have a one-legged pullback, two-legged pullback. Then someone maybe tries to take the failed two-legged or second entry, and that will now be if we go long, that's the TTT, right? And here it works pretty well. But see that the context is it is at the bottom of a range, and someone tries to trade through that, and we would never do that, right? Here, plus it bounces from the EMA plus from this resistance that it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 quadruple test or something like that. So this is what I mean. If the context is right, then we're more than happy to see this, because maybe additionally the benefit is that we get someone is trapped down here, right? Okay, but we need the context to be right. And often if you look through these examples, it is within a range. You can look at this one for oops, I think now I messed the whole sheet up. No, just need to drop it here again. Okay, so here trade number 9, where is it? Here, same thing. You have it once, twice. That's the third test, or it's a double test of that level here, right? Plus it's only really at the pre-party or beginning of party actually, and we have a two-legged pullback that if you would go long failed, and then it's great. It's a great context to take this this TTT. So this is maybe this flow. So you have the context, which is the range plus also the fact that we're rather in a down bias, right? So maybe if you like to draw channels, you would have drawn already maybe a channel from these lows, drag it up here, you know? So you have your context, this is most important. Then you wait for a setup. If you do not have the TTT, yeah, you would maybe have to double test as a setup, you know, if that's in your bag of setups. But that's what everyone does in the end. You have a setup, and it arises within this good context, and that gives you the signal. And then you go in there, right? So those were a couple of examples. I hope this somehow inspires and helps. For me, it was good to structure these things, and context is king. Yeah, that is it. Drop your comments below, questions, suggestions, whatever, critique. More than happy to hear from you, and have a nice day. Bye bye.